Donald Trump demands the Secretary of State in Maine recuse herself for being a biased partisan operator. The woman's name is Shenna Bellows, seen here. We'll learn a little bit more about her. But the letter went over to Maine from Trump's attorneys, some new people in Maine who we're going to learn about. They sent the letter saying, look, your prior tweets, your past comments about Donald Trump mean you're biased. You don't have a balanced viewpoint on whether Trump remains on the ballot or not. And so you got to go. Then we're going to listen to this disgraced ex-FBI agent called Peter Strozk, along with Representative Dingell, who's going to explain her position on Trump. But this is what the letter looks like that Trump's team sent in to Maine. From Donald Trump's defense to the Secretary of State of Maine, her name is Shenna Bellows. They say, all right, Shenna, this is Trump's request to disqualify you. Get out of here. Trump's request to disqualify the Secretary of State, which is this woman right here. So they say, look, President Trump requests that the Secretary of Maine disqualify herself from this matter because she's already concluded that Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection. Now, a determination that she made well before any evidence or argument even showed up in front of her. And remember, in Maine, we're having a conversation about whether the Colorado opinion can be presented to her and be persuasive or binding authority without even doing anything else, right? The election laws are different in Maine. So the Secretary of State just has some discretion to make these decisions, who shows up on the ballot. And so she asked for an update that we covered here saying, what should I do now that Colorado has made their ruling? So Trump is filing this, saying she can't make this ruling. Because the Secretary has exhibited personal bias in this matter, she should disqualify herself from further proceedings. Trump's team says, specifically, the Secretary here, Shenna, made 3 public statements showing that she already has prejudged this matter. The first statement came out on February 13th when Shenna issued a public statement on Twitter, which is now renamed X, thanks Elon, in which Shenna said this. Here's the link. The January 6th insurrection, she says, was an unlawful attempt to overthrow the results of a free and fair election. Yeah, right. Today, 57 senators, including King and Collins from Maine, you know, Susan Collins, found Trump guilty. That wasn't enough. Sorry, Shenna. That's short of impeachment, but nevertheless, an indictment. No, it isn't. An indictment is a whole separate legal concept. An indictment is something that you get that Jack Smith did. But she says the insurrectionists failed and democracy prevailed. Okay, so these are the same lunatics who are then going to turn around and say Trump needs to be thrown off the ballot to save democracy. Gosh. All right, so that's Shenna. All right, so here's another one from this genius. The secretary followed upon her own tweet. She said, not saying not disappointed. Well, yeah, because you guys lost. He should have been impeached. You mean convicted via impeachment. Okay, but history will not treat him or those who voted against impeachment kindly. Well, he's currently leading in the polls, Shenna. So I don't know what you're saying about that, but that sounds like a prejudgment as well. Now, third, on January 6, 2022, she's having flashbacks. Okay. Jen is like, oh, waking up in cold sweats, thinking about Liz Cheney again on the anniversary. 1 year after the event. Oh God, probably got cards, probably had a day of somberness where they got together in their little Democrat cliques and said, we survived. The secretary further endorsed the view that the events on January 6 constituted an insurrection. She said this, that the Democratic governance needed protection. All right, so these people are going to protect us from voting. Specifically, tweeted about a media report about her efforts to protect election officials. She retweeted WMTW TV, said Maine Secretary of State seeks to protect election officials, ballots, and voting machine integrity. And she said, okay, that sounds reasonable. Like, yeah, you're the Secretary of State. Like, we don't want stuffing ballots. We don't want voting machines like what happened in Arizona not functioning because, you know, arguably they were rigged by techs who caused delays when you needed to go vote for Kerry Lake. So yeah, we want that, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about rigging. Okay. Protection means rigging. That just, intersperse that. But she retweeted this. This is her ex. Says 1 year after the violent insurrection. It's important to do all we can to safeguard our elections. You know what that means, don't you? Censoring people who might challenge them, disenfranchising people from voting by securing the election buildings, I guess, or whatever. You know, we saw all of it. Changing ballot collection requirements, waiving signature requirements, safeguarding or rigging it. But using similar language, they say the challengers have claimed that the events of January 6th, now the challengers here, like all of this is going back up to this woman. Like this woman who said these things is now going to be able to protect us from voting for Trump. Isn't that nice? Using similar language, this constituted, she said, a violent insurrection. She said Trump somehow poses a danger and Maine has to be protected. And so they say, look, obviously you're a partisan hack. You've already passed judgment on this challenge. And so we don't need to hear from you. Boost yourself off the case. Furthermore, Trump's team says by calling impeachment proceedings and Senate vote, calling it an indictment, quotes, which is not even accurate, the secretary has exhibited a personal bias against him. She has bluntly stated that Trump should have been impeached, later called him an insurrectionist who failed. And these statements literally address the very claims that are at issue in her desk right now. She's already agreed with their factual claims. So they say, look, Trump deserves a fair and impartial hearing. Both Maine legislature and the Maine courts demand that state administrative proceedings be conducted fairly and with integrity. Anybody who's making decisions should do so without being a partisan hack. And the statute in Maine authorizes the secretary to appoint an impartial officer to adjudicate the challenge. And so you should do that. Whenever a hearing person like this woman, Shenna, is disqualified, or if it becomes impractical, substitute someone else in there. And so it goes without saying that the challenger's efforts to prohibit Maine Republicans from voting for Trump is a highly charged matter, serious constitutional and public policy consequences. And so the Secretary Shenna, her expression of support that Trump was an insurrectionist is at least probative evidence of prejudgment and bias. And so at minimum, that should be avoided. But so due to the expedited nature of this proceeding and the limited time to investigate, they say, look, undersigned counsel only learned of this information at the close of business in mid-December. And this request has been promptly filed following investigation and verification of the accuracy of her X's. Now, at this point in the proceedings, the secretary may designate an impartial hearing officer now and with stop considering this matter. This is a far better course of action than rendering judgment after it becomes evidence you've already predetermined this. And so for these reasons, President Trump asks that Shenna hereby disqualify herself from rendering a judgment in this matter, appoint an unbiased and impartial hearing officer, and transfer the matter to that person accordingly. Respectfully submitted to you, Shenna, by your friend Benjamin Hartwell, who lives over in Portland, Maine, and Scott Gessler, who resides over in Greenwood Village, Colorado. We've also got Gary Lakowski. Shout out to Gary in Alexandria, Scott in Colorado, and Hartwell in Portland, Maine, all doing good work here, calling out this corrupt partisan hackery from this Secretary of State. These are the people who are in charge. They are governing the elections. This is their entire life. They're operated and elected, right, and reappointed based on their political actions, and they are not in alignment with allowing you to vote for Trump. So people like Peter Strozk, who said, we're going to stop Trump when he was at the FBI, showed up on MSNBC to talk about Trump, saying, you know, they can't unwrite the 14th Amendment, and so Trump should be disqualified. Here is what this guy says. And this guy is such a weenie that he banned me on X because he's a weenie. Can't even deal with the arguments. Not only was the FBI and Elvis Chan very likely reporting our post, we got multiple strikes back during COVID, after January 6th, but he's also blocking us on Twitter because they're spineless weenies who can't deal with the truth. But then he shows up on MSNBC and says this.
Peter, it strikes me we've talked about Michigan. That's the big news we came in on. We've just talked about Maine, but I go back to the point that Joyce made earlier about the fact that there's going to have to be a unified understanding. This is not going to work if there is a patchwork of state solutions. She is thinking of that, of course, legally. That is the role we ask her to play. For you, from a security perspective, right, from a sense of people being able to get on board and say, these are the rules, whether or not you like them, this is how we are proceeding as a nation. Both your biggest concerns and sort of the best path forward here if we are able to get to a unified understanding.
Well, my biggest concern is that we have the presumptive Republican nominee for president who has and and continues to engage in calls for violence from his supporters.
What? Trump is asking for calls of violence from his supporters? That's insane. Trump is calling for violence from his supporters? This is the FBI, man. And of course, they live there, right? They go there and then they go over to X or Twitter before, and then they go over to FBI, Facebook, and they go over to, Instagram and all the things. And then they go up on MSNBC. It's just one big revolving door. They get little, cushy jobs like this to continue the narrative of the agency.
And look, there's an interesting data point here. Just shortly after the Michigan Supreme Court indicated they weren't going to take this up, Donald Trump took to Truth Social and lauded their decision, talked about how they were absolutely right. It would be very interesting. Frank pointed out how the FBI in Colorado out of the Denver office is actively working the threats to the Colorado justices.
There aren't any, okay? We heard CNN report that the other day when they said it was all made up.
Let's take a look at the data coming out of Michigan. Are there any threats right now to those Michigan Supreme Court justices who decided not to hear the case? Because the fact of the matter is, this isn't an environment where everybody is prone to violence.
No, who is? The Antifa people? The people blocking the freeways all over the place right now who vote left?
This is an environment where adherents and supporters of the former president are engaging in threats of violence, and there's a comparative absence of any sort of like behavior on the side. You don't see supporters of...
They're blocking airports. They're blocking freeways all over the country.
Joe Biden going out and threatening Michigan Supreme Court justices. So my worry is that Donald Trump is not constraining any of his behavior. His words result in violent action. It isn't stopping. He is well aware of what's going on. And I think whatever we see coming out of the Supreme Court, they can't unwrite the 14th Amendment. There is going to have to be some provision that if somebody engages in insurrection, that does potentially disqualify them from the presidency in some way, in some manner of determining that. Trump is not going to like that. And so the question is, as we move down into 2024, we've got a slow boil right now, but that pot is just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter on the oven.
Yeah, because you guys keep trying to remove people's right to vote in America away from them. It's the most anti-democratic, tyrannical thing that you could imagine. You had a right to vote. Now you don't because of them. So you want to talk about tyranny? You want to talk about pushing people to act? Steal away their God-given right to vote in this country. And yeah, you're going to have some problems with that. Now, take a look at this backdrop from this weird dude. So first of all, I don't know who this picture, I don't know if that's him and Lisa Page back there or what's happening back there. But remember, that was his ex-FBI lover, Lisa Page. I don't know if she's made any photos or what happened, but take a look at this book that this guy wrote. The title of his book is called Compromised, okay? Compromised, Peter Strozk, which is just like the worst cover that I've ever seen because it's saying Peter Strozk is compromised, which is actually the most accurate book title that we've ever seen, right? I do not think this guy has the interest of American democracy at heart at all. I think he's an apparatchik of the FBI and he's out there doing their bidding. We know the agency is still doing the work inside the agency. He is now just left. These people are reprehensible. Anyways, and he's a coward too. This gal is Representative Dingell, aka Representative Debbie Dingleberry. She responds to Trump's latest post attacking her because she criticized him. And we knew this was coming, okay? All this rotten hell stuff they're going to be very upset about. Here's Dingleberry.
Lashed out at you after you had told CNN that you thought the message that he had posted on Christmas Day, a lengthy one, there are multiple, but in short, he told his political rivals to rot in hell. And you called that a pathetic message from a former president. And in this latest post, he's going back to what is a very familiar line of attack, going after the death of your husband, his funeral honors. He's calling you a loser in all caps in this post. I just want to give you
What a nice way to invite a guest onto the show. Hey, you're just a total loser and an idiot and your husband's dead and you're somebody who should rot in hell. Anything to say? What an interview.
Chance to respond to that if you wish.
What do you want to say?
I'm going to say we got to treat each other with dignity and respect. Civility matters. Words have consequences.
Okay, Debbie Dingell, your side is calling Trump Adolf Hitler, saying Representative Strozk that he's calling for violence, which I've never heard ever. Not once. Not even anything close to that. Okay, Fight Like Hell is not even close to that. And you guys are just going through this. It's a little bit of a drama class happening right here with these two, playing with each other about how offended they are.
We're in a holiday right now that so many people have had a tough, hard year. We need some calm, some love, some hope. Not more negative words with division. And I think each and every one of us has a responsibility to stand up and ask everybody to treat each other with that respect and dignity. And I'm going to, as you say, he goes back to my late husband, who was a giant, a great man.
I'm sure,
who
rest in
touched many,
peace.
and he earned everything he got at his funeral when he was buried. It was Nancy Pelosi and actually Mitch McConnell and others that helped arrange some of the things. But I'm going to tell you two things. I remember I did not call Donald Trump. He called me. And I remember his kind words that day.
Oh, that's nice.
I was grateful that he lowered the flags, and I remember that act of kindness, and I choose to remember it as an act of kindness and a touching thing at a very hard time. And maybe all of us could remember that just having empathy and compassion and a little kindness will make everybody's day a little better.
Okay, let's see what Caitlin says.
And even,
she doesn't like that. That's like a nice, Trump gave me a nice phone call. He was nice about it.
You know, despite his attack, do you still stand by, I assume, your initial assessment that message about his political rivals rotting in hell was pathetic?
Why would you use that kind of language on Christmas Day?
Because you're demons.
This is a man that was a leader of this country and wants to be a leader again. Let's instill hope, civility, love, support, kindness, compassion, a few other words than rot in hell on Christmas Day.
Maybe you shouldn't be acting so demonic and monstrously, and maybe you'd have a better shot at getting into heaven. And Trump wouldn't have to say that you're going to probably rot in hell at some point in time. So we'll see where they go, where they end up. Of course, that's between them and their maker. We hope they live long, fruitful lives here. But they should not act so corruptly, and maybe Trump wouldn't have such choice words for them. But did you hear what that exchange was? I mean, it's like, did they even say anything? They're saying we need civility as they're locking people up in gulags, as FBI agents are raiding homes, as they prosecute their political opponents all across America. They want civility. No. How about no? See you in hell. All right. So this is Donald Trump, of course, Peter Strozk, Dingleberry, and others. Trump demanding a recusal from the Secretary of State in Maine. And we're going to continue to cover this, my friends. And so we'll be here. Thank you for subscribing. Don't forget to check out our website, robertgovea.com. We got a great shop there. Shirts, hats, the Watcher hat with the Watcher logo that I sport every single day. And I'd love it if you did too. Don't forget to check it out. Thanks for signing up for our newsletter over there, robertgovea.com. We'll be looking forward to seeing you and your friends right back here on the next one.